Mark Levin here. After any presidential election, I take time to reevaluate my own financial investments. That's why I continue to invest in gold for help with my financial protection. When it comes to gold, I only trust Advantage Gold. They're a top gold company in America, and that's who I turn to for my own gold purchases. Call them now at 800-900-8000. That's 800-900-8000 for a free gold investment kit. And see if you qualify for up to $1,000 in free silver. That's 800-900-8000. And tell them Mark Levin sent you. Performance may vary. You should always consult your financial and tax professional.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. You'll notice, those of you in the audience here, that things we discuss 24, 48, 72 hours early, or that I've written in my books and I've shared with you, are talked about soon thereafter. Soon thereafter. Activist judges, separation of powers, things that politicians and talk show hosts and cable news types don't normally dabble in. It's not something they typically understand. This is why I discuss these things with you. We're the point of the spear. This is why I post the things that I post on social media, because it's picked up and it's read. That's why it's important that you are the beacon of lights. You're the beacons. So we can keep pressing ahead with this agenda as we fight the radical left and the ruling class, we the people. Now, I was at Reagan National Airport this morning. Got up ultra early in the morning, my wife and I. She took me to the airport. Everything went very, very smoothly. Kept checking. I didn't trust the airlines. This case, American Airlines. Kept checking. The snow was not a problem. The ice was not a problem. The plane coming in from Boston, American Airlines plane, landed on time, was at our gate. The people working the gate, two very lovely people, I might add, a gentleman and a young lady, They were about to get us into our groups, you know, this group, that group, group 1 through 4 over here, 5 through 9 over there. And as we were getting in line, all of a sudden on the big screen, canceled. Now, the plane was at the gate. The pilots were in the plane. The crew was in the plane. Canceled. Now, I've had planes canceled before. Never while we're getting ready to get on the plane that's right in front of our two eyes. This is American Airlines at Reagan National. We were headed to Florida, where I had some interviews to do. And then, of course, everybody's lining up at customer service looking for a way out. The only flight that my wife could help me find was one that would take us through Orlando, and the damn thing would be 6.5 hours. I said, I'm not doing that. So I went home. And I was supposed to fly out tomorrow morning. But I want the top executives at American Airlines to understand something. Not the worker bees who just do what they're told and do the very best they can. And in this case, these agents were very concerned and upset. I could see it on their face, like, what the hell just happened? They had no idea. It just flashed on the board and they had to execute policy. When you take a plane and you give it to other customers, because that, I'm sure, is what the hell you did, and inconvenience all the other people who've come from God knows where, woke up at some crazy hour in the morning, and they're there at the gate, processed through your system, processed through TSA, and there's nothing wrong with the plane, and there's nothing wrong with the weather, but you make some jackass decision, some jerk in some dark room with a schedule. Nobody knows who it is, or if there's a committee of them, and show that kind of disrespect and inconvenience all those passengers or would-be passengers. It is pathetic. It is outrageous. And I'm talking to you, American Airlines. Normally, I don't do this. But I have never been in a situation where we're literally lining up to get on the plane and cancel pops up on the monitor without any warning whatsoever. It's one thing to do it an hour before so people can hustle and find another flight or contact their family members or whatever. But to do it this way is pathetic. And you can believe I'll be looking for other airlines to travel when I can. Part of the problem is the airport that I fly into in Florida, there's limited service. It's typically JetBlue or American Airlines. And there aren't many flights to where I need to go out of Dulles, which is what the airport that I live closest to. Look, they don't have to rearrange things for me. But when I and 150 or God knows how many other people drag our asses and do exactly what they say and show up at that gate with a functioning airplane, with a functioning pilot and co-pilot, with a functioning crew, everything's functioning, and then all of a sudden, that pops up on the screen, so they obviously can give that plane to somebody else, you better believe I'm pissed off. And it's not just about me. It's about the other people. And it's not just about them. It's about you, too. Again, it's one thing if you have notice. It's one thing if there's a mechanical issue. It's one thing if you have union rules and they're not showing up. God knows what, 1,000 different things. But that's not what happened here. That's not what happened. Airline industry is a tough industry to run. But don't run it into the ground, for God's sakes. You know, I just thought I'd point that out, Mr. Producer. And the inconvenience isn't just the inconvenience of travel. You go to an airport and then you have to leave the airport or what have you. It's everything that flows from that. I don't know all these other people, what their family situations are, what their home situations are, what their health situations are, what their business situations are. They have doctor's appointments scheduled. They're going to see a special surgeon. Maybe they're going to visit a builder. Maybe they have a sick kid. I don't know. It's all that and more. All that and more. There are legitimate reasons to cancel flights. This isn't one of them. And I'm using this massive megaphone to make it abundantly clear. It's one thing to do what you have to do, which inconveniences passenger. It's another thing to show utter and complete contempt and disrespect and inconvenience your would-be passengers. That's a totally different story. That's a totally different thing. And again, even the agents at the desk were stunned. They were good soldiers. They didn't complain out loud, but they looked at each other. I saw their faces like, what the hell just happened here? They had no notice. They had no idea. One of them grabbed the phone and started to make calls. I could hear her. What's the problem? What's the issue? Nobody told us. Exactly. Nobody told them. Now, I've got a lot to discuss here. I posted something on the internet while I was sitting there expecting to get on the plane, tapping it out with my right forefinger and sending it to Mr. Producer to post. And this is what I wrote early this morning for most of you who follow it anyway. The D.C. ruling class versus we, the people, and our Constitution. I've spent decades talking about and writing about the judicial tyranny of left-wing activist judges and the progressive, that is, Marxist project, starting with the likes of then-Professor Woodrow Wilson. Despite all the lies and static about the conservatives on the present Supreme Court who are actually originalists, doing the job of real jurists, these activists are destroying and intending to destroy the judicial system, using it as a kind of politburo to impose their ideology from the bench. Wilson will be proud. This is what he preached. This is the real constitutional crisis, not POTUS, Musk, and others trying to reestablish separation of powers, representative government, limited central authority, and so forth. The bureaucracy is a fourth branch of government, something I've been writing about and preaching about for decades. That is non-existent in our Constitution. The federal district courts are not found in our Constitution. They're a creation of Congress. Even judicial review can't be found in our Constitution. The case of Marbury versus Madison established it, but that was a case. That's not the Constitution. It's an implied power. Rather than these entities acting with deference and caution, given the fact that they are not in the Constitution, today they're bulldozing their way through the Trump administration, substituting their personal views and preferences for those of an elected president, seeking to sabotage his ability to govern. Then they and their surrogates have the temerity to claim Trump is a threat to a constitutional government, as they usurp it and him. The truth is that Trump is a threat to them, the corrupt, power-hungry ruling class, and their unchecked power over politics and culture. No, Trump is a threat to them. Their century of power grabs and abuses of power, they're autocrats, not Democrats. They seek to lord over us, not serve us. And they use our money and the tools of government for self-aggrandizement. They've been able to keep most of it in the shadows until now. Notice how they're desperately defending it, every inch and penny. The fraud and all of it. No one is saying a president has dictatorial powers, except in essence, those who celebrate Franklin Roosevelt and Lyndon Johnson and Barack Obama and Joe Biden. They're celebrating dictatorships. They're the closest to modern dictators our nation has ever experienced, all Democrats. Trump complies with federal court decisions. Biden defied the Supreme Court several times, not to mention violated immigration laws and other laws with impunity and with the support of his party and their media. Biden and his party have sought to destroy the independence of the Supreme Court and unleashed a campaign of intimidation and a barrage of threats against justices with whom they disagree. In fact, there's much about the Constitution they hate, including the Bill of Rights, Electoral College, its authors. It's a long list. This president complies with federal court decisions even when he disagrees with certain rulings. He appeals them through the legal process. That said, no judge has the power to run the executive branch, especially when it comes to basic executive functions, such as restructuring agencies, personnel matters like severance, temporary holds on spending to conduct reviews, access to agency information to conduct audits, and so forth. These judges have no power to substitute their personal and political preferences for that of a popularly elected president of the United States. And it's not lost on you and me that Democrats, whether public sector union bosses or state attorneys general, are behind this latest lawfare. They're colluding and conspiring. These cases are brought in Democrat strongholds to cherry-pick favorable judges. The entire edifice Trump is challenging is basically owned by the Democrat Party and paid for by you. They've created their own legal system. They've appointed their own judges to protect it all. It has nothing to do with protecting the Constitution and everything with dismantling it. The power of the unelected branches and their media are creations of the early progressives, that is, Marxists, to perpetuate their power and control even when they lose elections. And that's precisely what's taking place. They tried to stop Trump from becoming president, having failed miserably, despite their fascistic legal tactics. They're now trying to sabotage his electoral mandate, all the time waving around the very Constitution that they despise. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Did you see what the Federal Reserve did literally days after President Trump's victory? It lowered interest rates by a quarter. Do you know why it did that? It's worried about the economy. It's worried about the fact that jobs aren't being created. We're seeing all kinds of shifts in our portfolios, and it's important to stay aware. That's why I'm urging everyone to diversify and consider gold as one of your financial shields. Now, gold has weathered every kind of economic downturn throughout history. I want you to call Advantage Gold. They're the best of the best, folks. I've dealt with all of them. They're the best. They're my gold company. 1-800-900-8000. Get a free gold investment kit to see how you can get started with gold. I recommend Advantage Gold to anyone who's serious about protecting their wealth, and that's you. Call 800-900-8000 for your free gold investment kit, and you could even qualify for up to $1,000 in free silver. That's 800-900-8000. Call them now. Tell them Mark Levin sent you. You'll be very happy with them. Performance may vary. You should always consult your financial and tax professional. This is breaking news. Federal District Judge George O'Toole, who'd been appointed by Clinton, another tool, but that's a whole other story. This is Politico, the federally government-subsidized so-called news site. Judge allows Trump to implement fork-in-the-road deadline for federal workers. A federal judge is allowing the Trump administration to move forward with its plan to downsize the federal workforce by offering employees the option to resign now, but stay on the payroll through September. U.S. District Judge George O'Toole, an appointee of Bill Clinton, did not address whether the deferred resignation program is legal. Instead, the judge ruled Wednesday that several unions that sued over the program lack legal standing to pursue the issue in court. He doesn't have to address whether it's legal, moron. So the big union bosses, all Democrats, they tried to prevent this. This judge was somewhat receptive to the idea, but I think finally he realized, I'm going to get my ass kicked on appeal. I don't have any authority of any kind based on anything but my own viewpoint to stop this. This is why I do what I do, America. I think we have an influence here, you and I. The program turned the fork in the road and promoted by Trump advisor Elon Musk originally had a deadline of February 6th for workers to accept. Last week, O'Toole temporarily blocked the administration from enforcing the deadline while he considered the legal arguments in the case. The Boston-based judge denied the union's request for a court order that would have required the government to continue to hold open the deadline while courts weigh the program's legality. So stupid was this case that even this judge in Boston had to say, guys, what are you bringing me here? What do you expect me to do? I actually took a few days to figure this out. I don't have a leg to stand on. I'd like to help you. I really would. I'm glad you're here. I know why you're here in Boston, but there's nothing I can do for you. Another one where we're right. The markets are volatile. They're shooting up wildly only to drop without warning. The Fed just cut rates yet again, this time by a quarter point. Why? Because the Federal Reserve is not confident the economy is strong. In fact, last month only 12,000 jobs were created, all of them in the government. That's why I'm telling you again, diversification is crucially important. And diversification with gold is what I do. And the company I use, and I've used many, the best one is Advantage Gold. Call them now at 800-900-8000 for a free gold investment kit to see how gold can help you diversify your investments and take advantage now. Now, gold has been helping to protect and grow wealth for people for thousands of years. And in these times, it can be more crucial than ever. When it comes to gold, I trust Advantage Gold. They're one of the top gold companies in America. They're who I turn to when I purchase gold. Call them now, 800-900-8000. Call 800-900-8000 now for a free gold investment kit to see how gold can help you with your investment portfolio, a.k.a. your bank accounts, your paycheck. And when you do, you could qualify for $1,000 in free silver. That's 800-900-8000. Folks, don't wait. Call them now, 800-900-8000, and tell them Mark Levin sent you. Performance may vary. You should always consult your financial and tax professional.
You're listening to Denali, the great one.
The great one.
And you can call in now, 877-381-3811.
We're here today because we have filed charges against the state of New York. We have filed charges against Kathy Hochul. We have filed charges against Letitia James and Mark Schroeder, who is with DMV. This is a new DOJ, and we are taking steps to protect Americans, American citizens, and angel moms, like the mom standing right behind me, who you're going to hear from in a moment. New York has chosen to prioritize illegal aliens over American citizens. It stops today. As you know, we sued Illinois, and New York didn't listen. So now you're next. Mm-hmm. Millions of illegal aliens with violent records have flooded into our communities, bringing violence and deadly drugs with them.
Fantastic. Bundy is going to be a great attorney general. Great attorney general. And it's about time we prioritize American citizens. In 2023, those law enforcement grants to New York City alone amounted to $1.56 billion, according to the CIS, Center for Immigration Services, writes the New York Post. The DOJ had been expected to fork over more than $8 billion in funding to cities and their agencies in fiscal year 2025. But Bondi ordered her department to not enter into any new contract, grant, or other agreement to provide federal funding to non-governmental organizations that support or provide services, either directly or indirectly, that is, through subcontracting or other arrangements, to removable or illegal aliens. That move comes as Borders Czar Tom Homan ramps up immigration removal proceedings nationwide. So this is the real deal. And finally, they sued Letitia James's big fat you-know-what butt, and Hochul, a permanent Halloween figure. And that's a good thing. Now, I want to talk to you about appropriations. She says we're withholding appropriations. This is a little deep, but I'm going to talk about it now. And so you will hear others in cable, in radio, and so forth and so on mimic this. So stick with me. Illegitimate federal expenditures. You know there can be illegitimate federal expenditures, right? You wouldn't know that if you listen to the Democrats and their surrogates. That refers to unauthorized or improper use of federal funds. Unauthorized or improper use of federal funds. And that includes the failure to comply with relevant statutes, regulations, and contractual terms and conditions. What Elon Musk and Donald Trump are talking about are two sets of spending. Spending that promotes political and cultural agendas for the Democrat Party and the left and the other kooks, and outright waste, fraud, and abuse. These are not legitimate federal expenditures under any notion of appropriations. It's not about impounding funds. Here it's about funds that are not legitimately appropriated or legitimately used in the first place. A president clearly is not obligated to continue to fund fraud, waste, and abuse. A president is clearly not obligated to continue to fund, through the appropriation process, the political and cultural agenda, the ideological agenda of a single party, the Democrat Party. You see, part of the problem is our guys aren't making the right arguments when it comes to appropriations. Which spending bills authorized fraud, waste, and abuse? Those are illegitimate appropriations. President's not a mannequin who just sits there and watches everything go by within his own branch of government. So which spending bills authorized fraud, waste, and abuse? None of them? Okay, great. Then what's the problem? All of them? Okay, then it's an illegitimate appropriation. Congress's ability to appropriate actually has some constitutional limitations. Not a lot, but some, and they're significant. Which spending bills authorize tens of billions of dollars, if not more, for partisan political, cultural, and ideological causes, groups, and projects? That's not legitimate either. That's not legitimate either. And certainly the president can make that case. Now, if an executive department or agency, listen to me, if an executive department or agency has discretion on how to spend appropriated funds, because let's be honest, Congress is very sloppy. So sometimes they'll pass these big bills with big budgets, and they'll just throw it into, say, USAID or one of these other government entities. If an executive department or agency has discretion on how to spend those appropriations, then clearly the constitutional and elected chief executive of the executive branch who oversees these agencies and these departments can do the same thing. How can it be that a GS-15 in some backwater part of an agency can say, you know what, I'm going to issue a grant to this radical left-wing blah, blah, blah group. But the President of the United States, who's in the Constitution, who's elected, for whom this individual has ultimate reporting authority to, how can it be that the president can't make those decisions, or how can it be that he can't alter those decisions? It can't be. It's not possible. Here's the truth. Congress has delegated lawmaking to the bureaucracy that it created. It has delegated many spending priorities and decisions to the same bureaucracy. And I would argue that most of this, by the way, violated the whole notion of representative government and separation of powers. Most of it violates the notion of separation of powers, since the legislating and appropriating by this non-constitutional fourth branch of government is established within the executive branch. The bureaucracy doesn't sit in the legislature or the courts. It's not independent. It's housed within the executive branch and under the President of the United States. So you can see how unconstitutional this entire project is. It violates the core of separation of powers. But putting that aside just for now, here's the kicker. We're told that the only person in the executive branch, if you listen to the arguments that are being made, now I'm telling you things are going to be regurgitated as soon as the next legal analyst or political operative can get to a microphone, but stick with me, because I have developed these arguments. We are told that the only person in the executive branch had 2.5 million bureaucrats who cannot participate substantively in this process is the President of the United States. Bureaucrats, single bureaucrats, committees of bureaucrats, whole offices of bureaucrats can make these decisions, but the President of the United States cannot. Now, that's preposterous. Oh, there's more. He cannot make those decisions if his decisions will in any way counter out of control spending. That is, if in any way his decisions are intended to limit the spending or to prevent the spending for these fraud, abuse, waste, or political and culturally driven decisions, he's not permitted to do it, they said. He's the one person who's elected nationwide in every state. The only one we have, him and the vice president. Not senators, not congressmen, bureaucrats aren't elected at all. He's the only one who's not permitted. The only person in the entire mass of government who's elected by all the people, and they tell us he can't do it. Except if he wants to increase spending, wants to give the bureaucracy more money, wants to advance a radical agenda, say, student loan forgiveness, or belly dancing in Botswana, then it's okay. So only one way may a president involve him or herself in the process. If they're going to spend more money, whether there's fraud, abuse, it doesn't matter. Sure, we expect that, right? Or to advance the radical left ideology in politics and culture, in the economy and what have you. Then it's okay, because Biden did all those things. It only goes in one direction. You must spend, you must create debt, you must fund corruption, waste, and abuse, you must support the left's agenda, the ruling class agenda, the Democrat Party's agenda. Then it's okay. And then we're told the icing on the corruption ruling class cake. It's compelled by the Constitution. That this entire farce, this entire sham is compelled by the Constitution, which authorizes none of it. And we are told this by the very people who have told us that our Constitution is too old and written by men who were too white. We're told this by people who have looked for ways to usurp this Constitution, to rewrite this Constitution without amendments, to gut the Constitution, who are waving around the Constitution in defense of something the Constitution does not even authorize. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Did you see what the Federal Reserve did literally days after President Trump's victory? It's lowered interest rates by 1/4. Do you know why it did that? It's worried about the economy. It's worried about the fact that jobs aren't being created. We're seeing all kinds of shifts in our portfolios, and it's important to stay aware. That's why I'm urging everyone to diversify and consider gold as one of your financial shields. Now, gold has weathered every kind of economic downturn throughout history. I want you to call Advantage Gold. They're the best of the best, folks. I've dealt with all of them. They're the best. They're my gold company. 1-800-900-8000. Get a free gold investment kit to see how you can get started with gold. I recommend Advantage Gold to anyone who's serious about protecting their wealth, and that's you. Call 800-900-8000 for your free gold investment kit, and you could even qualify for up to $1,000 in free silver. That's 800-900-8000. Call them now. Tell them Mark Levin sent you. You'll be very happy with them. Performance may vary. You should always consult your financial and tax professional. Remember the award given to Barack Milhouse Benito Obama? Nobel Peace Prize. I think he was in office about 14 seconds, just left the men's room, and then got word that he won the Nobel Peace Prize. Remember that? Here's Donald Trump in 3 weeks. Look what he's done. Look what he's done. Hostages coming home from 3 different countries. You've got, he's involved, he's in the thick of the activities taking place in the Middle East and Ukraine and Russia in terms of trying to bring peace to these various areas. He's given up on Hamas, which was just a matter of time, of course. Look what he's doing. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. I just don't believe we ever have. It's incredible. Look what the Democrats are doing. They're taking to the streets and screaming curse words, Mr. Producer, like they're a bunch of drug-addled homeless people. In fact, I thought they were drug-addled homeless people. And they seem to think the word that begins with an F is something that appeals to you folks, because now that's the word they throw out there. Used to be Hitler, and now it's the F-bomb. They don't care if little kids are listening. So they've gone nuts. I mean, they are nuts, but they are now presenting themselves as nuts. But they come across as drug-addled homeless people screaming in the middle of the streets. Obviously don't have a lot to do. Well, there you go, Mr. Producer. That's what happens when you have stack after stack. You understand what I mean. There's so much more to get to here, America, and we're going to get to all of it. Constitutional crisis. We don't need lectures from a party that defended slavery and fought a civil war in defense of it. We don't need lectures from a party that supported separate but equal right up into the 1950s. We don't need a lecture from a party that supported Woodrow Wilson, who supported eugenics aimed at, among others, black people. Sick. We don't need support from a party that supported Franklin Roosevelt, who in 1940 refused to sign a federal anti-lynching bill. We don't need a lecture from a party today that embraces racism and Islamism, centralized government that rejects the whole notion of separation of powers, balance of powers, limited powers, a party that goes after the independence of the Supreme Court, a party that wants to eliminate parts of the Constitution it disagrees with, like the Electoral College, a party that wants to shred the First Amendment and the Second Amendment and the Fourth and the Fifth Amendments, that shreds the Sixth and the Eighth Amendments, the Ninth and the Tenth Amendments, that liberals in this audience don't even know what I'm talking about. A party that takes the 14th Amendment, turns it inside out in order to advance its radical left agenda. A party that has used and abused our Constitution to try and put a former president in prison while he's running for president again, based on phony charges. Cockamamie charges. We're going to have a guest on later in this program. We're going to talk about one of these areas, the documents case, with Michael Ding, attorney for America First Legal. They have uncovered documents that demonstrate that the National Archives of the United States isn't some innocent independent agency just collecting documents to put them in frames so you can go to the archives and view them, which is all they're supposed to do pretty much. But that they set up and lobbied to take out Donald Trump. That's right. You heard it from me. And we're going to have one of the attorneys at American First Legal who's been working on this, the shocking discovery of documents, which is why you're not reading about it in many places. Certainly not the federal taxpayer financed Politico. You're not going to see it on MSLSD. You're not going to see it on the Constipated News Network. No. They're too busy talking about a constitutional crisis. We are in a post-constitutional America, Bill Maher. You don't even have to ask our friend Byron Donalds. I've written about it and I said it. But not because of us, not because of Trump, but because of the likes of you and your party and the Democrats. I'll be right back. This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. Hello, 877-381-3811. Reminder, you can always listen to this program when you're on the run or you don't have access to a radio. We love you to listen to your radio, our affiliates and our Sirius XM satellite and so forth. But you have options. You can go to marklevinshow.com, click on Radio Rewind, and select your favorite platform. Or if you already have a favorite podcast platform, just search Mark Levin Show. We are ubiquitous. You can also find all my full podcasts, interviews, this show, specials on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Yes, we have a YouTube channel. You just search Mark Levin. That is Mark Levin Show in YouTube, Mark Levin Show in YouTube, or go to youtube.com at Mark Levin Show. 3 hours is barely enough to do this show. It really is. There's just so much going on, especially now. Now the battle is engaged. Now we're finally talking about something we've been talking about here for almost 25 years. Debt, deficits, the destruction of our society by destroying our currency and our financial system. Oh, it's so boring. It's not so boring now, is it? The battle's being waged, America, and the battle of ideas is crucial so we can persuade as many of our fellow citizens as possible. It's really quite important. And I want to tell you something. The Democrat Party is defending every single one of these programs and all the fraud that goes with it. You've not heard them say, hey, why don't we all sit down and figure out what to cut? Not once. They believe that you like having your tax dollars spent this way or having somebody else's tax dollars spent this way. Here, the Washington Examiner. Donald Trump has Democrats on the ropes with his surging support from African Americans. In a new Signal survey shared with Secrets, Trump has a shocking, they write shocking, 42% approval rating from black men, a massive edge over any past Republican president. Other than Lincoln, I would assume. 42% of black men are supporting Trump. Brock McCleary, Signal vice president of polling, told Secrets 42% of black men approving of Trump's job so far is no small thing. Unlike Democrats' approach previously, he said, this isn't about placation or offering new attractive policies with no follow-through. His popularity and approval surges because he does the things he says he'll do, and that's a breath of fresh air for everyone. He's saying it's really aspirational. Trump has long bragged, they write, about his connection with black voters. First, when he met with many black construction workers in New York City development projects. Then when he became a notable boxing and fighting fan, sometimes huddled with Don King and other black promoters. In his elections, he's picked up slightly more black voter support than other Republicans. But since 2020, his support, they write, has soared as Democrats have turned uber-liberal on social issues. That led Signal Analysis of its monthly survey to declare black men love Trump. The political realignment from November appears to be accelerating as Trump continues to make inroads with historically Democrat-leaning constituencies. 42% of black men approve of the job that Trump's doing, and 4 in 10 have a favorable opinion of him. The results match other recent polls, including a John Zogby strategy survey featured in Secrets that showed the so-called Obama coalition swinging behind Donald Trump. And part of that coalition includes younger voters. And the Signal survey found that they are leading the march to Trump and away from liberal Democrats. Quote, throughout the election, we highlighted just how far out of touch Democrats have become from the American public. And now after Trump's victory and a breakneck pace of action on his campaign promises, it's pretty clear Democrats haven't learned much, said pollster and signal President Brent Buchanan. And you can see this. You can just see this watching them. 1930s Union chants. Take the ticked-off, young, diverse, working-class voters that propelled Trump to the White House, for example. They were a key constituency that gave Trump an edge over former Vice President Harris. As white voters stayed flat in their margin for Trump, today they're not nearly as ticked off, as they are more optimistic than ever about the direction of our country in less than a month. If you're on Team Trump right now, you've got to be feeling good about these numbers, says Buchanan, and the quick progress they've made already with voters. The survey was wide-ranging, showed support for many of Trump's efforts and executive orders signed so far. Some of the highlights. Ready? I don't normally do this poll stuff, but this is very interesting. We're not talking about 12 pollsters all vying for attention and TV here. Some of the highlights. When it comes to hiring or merit or diversity, equity, and inclusion, 64% picked merit for government workers. Merit. On declassifying the assassination files of John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, 56% backed Trump's order to declassify files. Why wouldn't you back them? A majority backed Trump's effort to stop illegal immigration, and 55% opposed sanctuary cities. Tariffs on China, 50% support. Acquiring Greenland, backed up by a plurality, 44%. And it goes on. So what do the Democrats do? They're defending fraud and waste and abuse. They're defending the massive bureaucracy. They're defending the union bosses that represent the massive bureaucracy. They're defending the indefensible. The things that Trump's going after have nothing to do with the well-being of the American people, the safety, health, security of the American people. Nothing. Hundreds of billions of dollars down the toilet. $50 to $100 billion in fraud in Social Security. The Democrats haven't lifted a finger to help. They haven't even raised a voice in support of what's trying to be done here. Elon Musk, a few years back, was a liberal Democrat. Now they're trying to destroy him. But they can't destroy him. He's worth $400 billion, and he gives them the finger. What are they going to do to him? And I love it. Oh, he's got billions of dollars in contracts with the federal government. Excuse me. The federal government has billions of dollars in contracts with him because they need him. He doesn't need them. Like I said, he's worth $400 billion. He doesn't need their $8 or $10 billion. And not only that, we have 2 astronauts in space that NASA can't get the hell out of space. So we're relying on Elon Musk to get them, to save their lives. This isn't your typical Democrat grifter who's feeding at the public trough. God knows how much he and his businesses and his employees pay in taxes into the public trough. Here's a billionaire, not a billionaire. Not even a multi-billionaire, a multi-billionaire, the richest man on the planet, trying to help his country. We have the richest president ever trying to help his country. That's why I keep telling you, this isn't about the middle class versus the rich. It's about the ruling class versus we, the people, and the Constitution. That's what's taking place here. That all these pundits and so forth, self-appointed, self-righteous intelligentsia, are missing completely. This is the battle. It's the battle that Trump is waging with the bureaucracy that he's overseeing. But he's being told, just because you oversee it doesn't mean you can oversee it. Excuse me? Oh, yes. Federal health agencies restore web pages and databases, and data sets following judge's order. I'm going, now what? You know, there's hundreds of these clowns in these black robes, these slip and fall lawyers, these ambulance chasing lawyers that get lifetime appointments. And look at that. Look at, he's a Your Honor. Oh. The Associated Press federal health agencies have restored several web pages and database sets following a judge's order to bring back public access to information that had been removed to comply with a presidential executive order. What? So a judge orders federal agencies to change their websites? How the hell did he get the power to do that? Who's the judge? U.S. District Judge John Bates in Washington. Oh, Johnny. Another Republican, another rhino. He wants to get in on the act, like his buddy Royce Lamberth. Tell me, Johnny, what is the constitutional authority you have for making this decision instead of the president? Even if you don't like the decision, Johnny, even if you're troubled by the decision, Johnny, who elected you president? Where did you get these powers from? I want you to show me in the United States Constitution, Johnny Bates, Judge, Your Honor, show me where your authority is to order a federal agency to restore web pages on their website in defiance of a presidential executive order. Show me where it is. Tell me, does the President of the United States have the authority to tell you to put cases back on your docket? Is this not the dumbest thing? Johnny, have you ever heard of separation of powers? Have you? Well, you violated it. You know what we call a judge who does that, Johnny? A putz. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
This country was founded on freedom. Freedom from a country that forced us to buy overpriced tea, then try blockading us when we dumped their tea into the ocean. How'd that work out? Well, it's time to throw your overpriced big wireless contract overboard, too. You don't need to pay $100 a month per person just to get a free phone. Pure Talk, my cell phone company, says no to inflated prices and gimmicks. With a qualifying plan of just $45 a month, you can choose a free iPhone 14 or a free Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plans. And yes, this is for a premium service. Unlimited talk, text, 25 gigs of data, and mobile hotspot at a fraction of the price of the big three. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Get your free iPhone 14 or Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plans by visiting puretalk.com/Levin today. Switching is easy. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN to claim your free iPhone or Galaxy with a qualifying purchase from Pure Talk. America's wireless company, my wireless company. It's a really huge story that broke today involving American First Legal. It's really quite explosive. American First Legal has acquired documents through the legal process, of course, that this entire classified documents case was a sham prosecution from day one. And we have with us Michael Ding, an attorney at American First Legal who worked on this. Michael, how are you, and what exactly did you find?
Thanks for having me, Mark. So we've been investigating the National Archives and their involvement with the classified document prosecution against Trump ever since the FBI had their unprecedented raid on Mar-a-Lago. And so the official story from the Biden administration was that the Trump team sent over some boxes to the archives around January 2022. They conducted a review. They found classified documents. Oh, gosh. And then they referred it to the DOJ and FBI for investigation. And so, again, that's 2022. But what these new emails that were released by the archives show is that by summer of 2021, the archivist was already out of patience and was finding a way to get the Attorney General and the Department of Justice and send them after President Trump. So they were out to get him far earlier than that, and they worked with the Department of Justice and Biden's White House counsel to make it happen.
Well, let's really dig into this a little bit. So you have these emails. I guess this is through FOIA. You probably had to litigate for them, correct?
So we did not have to litigate for this, thankfully. However, this was not released when they first processed the request back in the day. They had only just re-reviewed some of the records and due to some filings that were made in court recently. And so I guess they were forced to conduct a review and reevaluate their withholdings and ended up releasing these records just last week.
So they weren't released, obviously, in time for the people to know before the election. So I would argue that they were slow-walked in one fashion or another.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you this, Michael Deng with American First Legal. You have these emails, you have these documents. And so I assume they provide evidence of communications between the National Archive and the Justice Department, as well as communications with potentially the White House?
Yes, that's exactly what these show, and it fills out the picture. I mean, just like us, I'm sure you and others have long understood that this was a sham prosecution from the start, but these emails really fill out the timeline a little bit more. So from 2021, they were trying to find a way to send the Department of Justice after Trump, even though President Trump's team was cooperating in good faith with the archivists and trying to get the records that they needed to get back and process them and send them back.
Well, let's stop right there. So this completely undermines the narrative that Trump was dragging his feet, because according to you, the timeline actually moves up, that Trump and his people were trying to work with the archives, but the archives was actually working to try and criminalize this process with the Department of Justice. Is that the point?
That's exactly right. They're certainly trying to raise the temperature and make this much more serious for President Trump than it needed to be at all. So they had two plans that they ended up doing. First plan was to try to shoehorn some provision in the Federal Records Act that says the National Archives can go after the Attorney General to recover records that were lost or about to be destroyed or whatnot. And they recognized that under the Presidential Records Act, there is no such provision, but they were still trying to shoehorn this provision from the Federal Records Act, and that was circa August, September 2021. But they had to scrap that plan because they realized that it doesn't work. They can't send the DOJ after President Trump because the National Archives, they were still having ongoing discussions with President Trump's team. And they thought that there was a very good chance in their emails that said this could help clarify, if not actually resolve the issue. So in their own mind, the National Archives had a sense that if they just kept working with Trump's people, this issue would be resolved and there would be no need for the Department of Justice to get involved.
So they had to figure out a way to get the Department of Justice involved, even though, as President Trump has said from day one, we were working with these people trying to accommodate them, correct?
That's correct. And so they had to come up with another plan. And that's where Biden's Office of White House Counsel got involved, which certainly makes this far more scandalous.
And what happened?
So as we've highlighted long before, that there's a provision in the Presidential Records Act involving a special access request where there's only certain ways that different people can get access to a former president's records. One is, Congress has a process where they can get these records. Two, a federal agency can go to a court and get a judge to issue a subpoena for those records. And then three, the incumbent president, they can seek the records for the current business of the incumbent president. So we've pointed this out, and we filed an amicus brief, American First Legal. We filed an amicus brief at the trial court in Florida in this case, and we really spelled that out, that if the Department of Justice needed to get access to President Trump's former records, they needed a court-ordered subpoena. But instead, they relied on the White House to use their provision under the Presidential Records Act to get a special access request to President Trump's records. And here we have an email showing that Deputy White House Counsel Jonathan Su came up with some concocted reason where they said, oh, well, we need to get access to this person's notes from the last administration.
All right, let's take a short break. Your point is that the White House, Biden's direct lawyers, were intimately involved in this entire process. More when we return. This country was founded on freedom. Freedom from a country that forced us to buy overpriced tea, then tried blockading us when we dumped their tea into the ocean. How'd that work out? Well, it's time to throw your overpriced big wireless contract overboard, too. You don't need to pay $100 a month per person just to get a free phone. Pure Talk, my cell phone company, says no to inflated prices and gimmicks. With a qualifying plan of just $45 a month, you can choose a free iPhone 14 or a free Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plans. And yes, this is for a premium service. Unlimited talk, text, 25 gigs of data, and mobile hotspot at a fraction of the price of the big three. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Get your free iPhone 14 or Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plans by visiting puretalk.com/Levin today. Switching is easy. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN to claim your free iPhone or Galaxy with a qualifying purchase from Pure Talk. America's wireless company, my wireless company.
Mark Levin, the thunder on the right. Call in now, 877-381-3811.
Folks, I want to go through this to sum up, and then we'll expand on it slightly with Michael Ding, attorney at American First Legal. What they've uncovered here is really earth-shattering, and my advice to you folks, even though you don't need it, Michael, is to get this information to the Attorney General of the United States to see if there's any action she should take. So just to go over this, they have an email dated September 15, 2021, from Gary M. I'm going to read it, Stern, who's the General Counsel of the National Archives. And I'll explain in a moment. So this means we are holding off on a DOJ letter. What about Congress? Well, let me actually go to the letter above this, if I may. This is dated, the email above it, this is dated the 15th, that's right. Correct. We cannot go to the Department of Justice. They're already talking about trying to criminalize this, folks. You understand? We cannot go to the Department of Justice while we are engaged in ongoing discussions with the White House and the Trump rep, which could help to clarify, if not actually resolve the matter. So they're hot to trot to get this to the Department of Justice, effectively the criminal division, even while they're in the middle of discussions with Trump's people in which they say this might resolve itself, and the White House is involved in it as well, the White House counsel's office. We can address these social media issues and blah, blah, blah later. And so there's a second email. So that means we are holding off on a Department of Justice letter. What about Congress regarding social media issues? So they're looking around for ways to criminalize this or to create a really big issue here, even though they're in good faith discussions, that is, at least the Trump people are, with the National Archives. And this has been the position of the Trump people from day one. The call took place last week, which served to get Deputy White House Counsel Jonathan Su, who you were talking about, Michael, up to speed on the issue and the dispute over whether there are 12 or 24 boxes. This week, Jonathan told me that they are open to having redacted, participate in a meeting with redacted, and possibly redacted. The former staff secretary who was redacted, principal source. Accordingly, they need access to redacted notes from the last administration, which we now hold. So they will be making it special access request. Now, unfortunately, I have to use a magnifying glass because I can't read it all. But in 2023, AFL exposed that a special access request from the Biden White House led to the FBI's raid on Mar-a-Lago. In both the National Archives' response to AFL and Special Counsel Jack Smith's superseding indictments against President Trump, the Biden administration's official position was that the archives referred the matter to the DOJ for investigation in February 2022 after it received the classified documents from Mar-a-Lago. So, number one, the archives did not act on its own. Number two, the White House counsel, meaning Biden, was intimately involved and had to know about what was taking place step by step. And number three, this was all going on in the late summer and early fall of 2021. 2021, which was, Michael, relatively soon after the president left office. It's not as if he'd been sitting on this stuff for a year, you know, piddling around. They were in open discussions about this. Do I have this about right?
Yeah, you make a good point, Mark. This was summer 2021 when President Trump had just packed up and left from the White House. And you have to compare that to former President Barack Obama, where for a very long time his records were held in some warehouse in Hoffman Estates, Illinois. Or even more recently, Vice President Joe Biden's records. We didn't find out about those hanging out in his different beach houses until more than 4 years later. I mean, it was the Obama-Biden administration, then the Trump administration, and then the Biden administration, and then we find out about his records that weren't properly stored. So in terms of timeline, they certainly did not extend the same grace to President Trump.
Mm-hmm. And then you have these other extraordinary, outrageous acts like the SWAT team, you know, criminal warrant, which I question the warrant, but that's a whole other issue. SWAT team sent to Mar-a-Lago. It looks like whenever they could go over the top and increase the aggressive criminalization of the case, they did. Is that your sense of this thing, too?
They were certainly finding any way they could to turn up the heat on President Trump and weaponize the law enforcement functions and powers against him. That much is clear.
So what is America First Legal going to do with this information? Will it be putting it in a package with a nice letter and a bow around it to the Attorney General of the United States, at least informing her directly of your findings?
Well, we certainly hope that the Attorney General, who is doing so much in just the first week there, takes a look at this information, looks at whether there's been any conspiracy against rights or any other possible violations of federal law that was taken by these former government officials. I know that President Trump has recently fired some of the folks at the National Archives, but we really need to get to the bottom of this and find out all the people that were involved.
100%. All right. Well done over there. And Michael, I understand you were the lead lawyer, certainly one of them on this matter, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of intense back and forth to get it, and you pulled it off. So congratulations to you. You know, as an old president of Landmark Legal Foundation, I know how much goes into this. So congratulations to you and the team.
Thank you so much, Mark.
All right, take care of yourself. That's America First Legal. It's an outstanding organization and did an outstanding job here. And I just wanted you to have the background because while it's getting attention, it's certainly not getting enough attention. You know, you had Bill Barr out there. Just give him the documents. It's an open and shut case. Of course, they lost the case because two other former attorneys general said, wait a minute. More fundamentally, this guy, Jack Smith, is an unconstitutional appointment that violates the Constitution's appointments clause. They actually violated their own internal regulations in making the appointment as well. And so we had a great judge, this Judge Cannon, in Florida, who did it by the book. She wrote an opinion that's as brilliant as any law review article you'll ever read, and most of you won't read it, which is why most of you have more sense than I do. But I wanted to point that out. I wanted to bring this to your attention. In fact, Eric Schmidt, the great senator from Missouri and the former great attorney general of Missouri, good guy. He says the lawfare coordination, referring to this matter, between the Biden White House, Garland's DOJ, and state prosecutors makes Watergate look like a third-rate break-in. He's 100% right. 100% right. And I would encourage Senator Schmidt and the other senators on Capitol Hill who are wise enough to care about these sorts of things, the lawyers, the former prosecutors, even the former defendants. You ought to take a look at what's been uncovered here because it's really quite atrocious. I think Grassley's committee, Johnson, all these people ought to seek from AFL their information on this because it blows a big hole through the timeline that the White House put out, the media was perpetuating. In other words, the big lie about the documents case. And it was a big lie from beginning to end. And what's amazing is you still have legal analysts on cable TV who told you this was an open and shut case when I told you it absolutely was not. And that I knew former attorneys general were going to challenge the appointment. My group, Landmark Legal Foundation, from which I'm retired, they have a great president there, Pete Hutchison, a great new chairman there, John Richardson, who was chief of staff to Attorney General Meese before I was. These are great people, Matt, Mike, and the rest of the team there. They were involved in the challenge, among others, on the appointment of Jack Smith. My former Attorney General, who I worked for, Ed Meese, he, and Mukasey, another great former Attorney General, they were involved in challenging this too. This was never an open and shut case, despite what these legal analysts said, despite what the former Attorney General said. It never was. The big upfront issue was the appointments clause, but there are many other issues too, many. And this is the nature of a motions practice, or the nature of confronting government like this, that most of these analysts don't know a damn thing about. They told you this was an open and shut case. They told you this was the most vulnerable case for Donald Trump. And I told you here, on Blaze, on Fox, on other shows on Fox, this is a non-case. Just like I told you the January 6th case, that the obstruction issue would be thrown out by the Supreme Court, which it was. It had absolutely nothing to do with January 6th. I told you the 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act was preposterous, which it was, and it is. I told you that using a federal statute that's been used against federal contractors for misappropriation of funds had nothing to do with it. That this guy took three federal statutes off the shelf, dusted them off, and threw them at Donald Trump. Because he knew that anything he did would result in a conviction in Washington, D.C., just as they did in Manhattan, which was even crazier. Even crazier. And that's why I go through with you the Constitution and appropriations, the Constitution and the roles of a judge and judicial review. These are all very, very important. Where the hell else are you going to get this from? Seriously. Plus some music from time to time, right, Mr. Producer? I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
This country was founded on freedom. Freedom from a country that forced us to buy overpriced tea, then try blockading us when we dumped their tea into the ocean. How'd that work out? Well, it's time to throw your overpriced big wireless contract overboard, too. You don't need to pay $100 a month per person just to get a free phone. Pure Talk, my cell phone company, says no to inflated prices and gimmicks. With a qualifying plan of just $45 a month, you can choose a free iPhone 14 or a free Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plans. And yes, this is for a premium service. Unlimited talk, text, 25 gigs of data, and mobile hotspot at a fraction of the price of the big three. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Get your free iPhone 14 or Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plans by visiting puretalk.com/Levin today. Switching is easy. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN to claim your free iPhone or Galaxy with a qualifying purchase from Pure Talk. America's wireless company, my wireless company. Just a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, in addition to our fantastic radio platforms, and we really want to thank all the owners and the general managers and the program directors. We love you folks. You're fantastic. Carry this show. Truth is, if this show wasn't on your platform, well, it'd be a hole in your programming, don't you think? I mean, let's be honest about it. But we have this wonderful mutual support system. That's what it's all about. It's called the market system. And you folks, you have a lot of options out there. You can go to marklevinshow.com, click on Audio Rewind, and select your favorite platform if you want to listen that way. Or you can search Mark Levin Show on your favorite podcast platform and listen to us on your handy-dandy iPhone or Android and so forth. And you know you can find all my shows, podcasts, interviews, specials on our YouTube channel. Yes, we have a YouTube channel. You can go to youtube.com at Mark Levin Show, or just search Mark Levin Show on YouTube. We want to thank Sirius Satellite. We want to thank all the live streaming, the Mark Levin app, the iHeartRadio app. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, you want to hear this show? You can't miss it if you want to hear it. Just always go to the mothership, marklevinshow.com. That is my website, my official website, and it provides you with all the options. Or just turn on your radio. And if we're not there, use one of the other options. You're the king and the queen. Maybe you're a queen who wants to be a king who wants to be a queen. I'm not getting into that. I'm just saying, you're in charge. You know, like a 5-year-old says, I'm in charge of myself. Well, you really are in charge of yourself. And that's a good thing. So this entire medium has really revolutionized. It really has. And I say I love our satellite partners and all the other partners who bring this podcast, who bring this radio show, who bring this, whatever you want to call it. I call it the National Town Hall Meeting. Who bring this to anybody who wants to listen anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. We've had callers from London, from Paris, from Israel, Moscow, Toronto, everywhere and anywhere in the world. It's a fantastic medium. It really is. And, you know, I used to listen to AM radio. That was it when I was a kid. Had my Radio Shack transistor radio, Mr. Producer. Boy, I'm sounding like one of these old radio guys. But it's fascinating if you think about it, how technology changes things, changes businesses, changes broadcasting. And he used to have a long antenna, and I would move it around. Try to get stations, WABC, WOR, and so forth. Our Power Hour is next, Hour 3. I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
This is the Power Hour, Hour 3. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. What's this constitutional crisis stuff? Well, you know, the Democrats have a very limited vocabulary. Apparently the F word, Hitler, and constitutional crisis. There was no constitutional crisis when Joe Biden defied 3 Supreme Court decisions. No. They deserved it. There was no constitutional crisis when he refused to uphold his oath of office and enforce federal immigration law. No, that was a good thing. And I can go down the list, but why should I? But in Donald Trump's first term of office, lest we forget, they tried it back then, too. A constitutional crisis. You see, anytime they don't win, anytime they don't have control, anytime they're not advancing their Marxist, Islamist, radical, unconstitutional agenda, then we have a constitutional crisis. Hat Tip Newsbusters, again, this is a short montage from 2017 to 2020, Donald Trump's first term as president. Cut one, go.
We might be on the path to a constitutional crisis.
We will ask 2 experts about whether or not this is a constitutional crisis.
We've never faced quite the constitutional crisis that we do right now.
They are fomenting a constitutional crisis.
Yes. Are we staring down the barrel of a constitutional crisis?
This is an existential constitutional crisis.
A constitutional crisis, possibly.
The constitutional crisis alarm bells are ringing. But is anybody listening?
We're now like one subway stop from a real constitutional crisis.
We are in effect, a constitutional crisis.
Constitutional crisis. We're hearing it over and over again.
Nancy Pelosi's already said that Donald Trump is unfit for office. She said that he belongs in prison. She says that we're in a constitutional crisis. If that's not enough to begin an impeachment inquiry, then what on earth is?
Warnings of an impending constitutional crisis ripped through the nation's capital.
There are experts who are saying this is a constitutional crisis.
We are at a dangerous time in our history, a constitutional crisis that probably is the most severe moment since the Civil War.
Wow, and that was the first term, right, Mr. Producer? But now let's update it just a few weeks ago. Dementia Joe is gone. No constitutional crisis there. No. The laptop, the selling out to the communist Chinese and other enemy states. No, that's not a constitutional crisis. No. Tax fraud, preemptive pardons, on and on. No, that's not a constitutional crisis. Guy's as sharp as a tack. And so now the last few weeks, cut to go.
By definition, are we in a constitutional crisis?
Dangerously close to a constitutional crisis.
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 New warnings of a constitutional crisis just weeks into Trump's second term.
And the stage is set for a constitutional crisis.
Could this signal the start of a constitutional crisis?
Legal experts say our country could be headed toward a constitutional crisis.
They're calling this a constitutional crisis.
This is a constitutional crisis.
I am unapologetic in suggesting we are in a constitutional crisis right now.
Are we already in a constitutional crisis?
Those two words, right? Constitutional crisis.
I think this is the most serious constitutional crisis the country has faced, certainly since Watergate.
That is a constitutional crisis. That is a crisis for our democracy.
We've got our toes right on the edge of a constitutional crisis here.
We are basically on the cusp of a constitutional crisis.
I think they're having a constipational crisis. What do you think of that, Mr. Producer? Caroline Levitt was at the White House today, her briefing, talking about the constitutional crisis, and for the Democrats, their constipational crisis. Cut 3, go!
Before I take questions, I would like to address an extremely dishonest narrative that we've seen emerging over the past few days. Many outlets in this room have been fear-mongering the American people into believing there is a constitutional crisis taking place here at the White House. I've been hearing those words a lot lately. But in fact, the real constitutional crisis is taking place within our judicial branch, where district court judges in liberal districts across the country are abusing their power to unilaterally block President Trump's basic executive authority. We believe these judges are acting as judicial activists rather than honest arbiters of the law, and they have issued at least 12 injunctions against this administration in the past 14 days, often without citing any evidence or grounds for their lawsuits. This is part of a larger concerted effort by Democrat activists and nothing more than the continuation of the weaponization of justice against President Trump. Quick news flash to these liberal judges who are supporting their obstructionist efforts: 77 million Americans voted to elect this president. And each injunction is an abuse of the rule of law and an attempt to thwart the will of the people. As the president clearly stated in the Oval Office yesterday, we will comply with the law in the courts, but we will also continue to seek every legal remedy to ultimately overturn these radical injunctions and ensure President Trump's policies can be enacted.
You go, girl. Now, I would ask these federal judges, such as they are, if you don't respect separation of powers, if you don't respect the rule of law, if you don't respect the Constitution, if you don't respect the lane that you're in, then why should we respect you? If you don't adhere to the Constitution, then why should people adhere to your rulings? That's right, the least dangerous branch, they call it. Really, the least dangerous branch? I can go through a half a dozen Supreme Court decisions, and no, not by this court, by older courts, of course, that were very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. One led to a civil war, as I recall. Robert Garcia is a lowlife. He's a representative. He's on the DOJ subcommittee. I guess we had to sort of blurt this out, didn't we, Mr. Producer? And he picked up where Anderson Cooper left off. Little Dick Durbin, the middle word between Little and Durbin. Cut 5, go.
Now, I find it ironic, of course, that our chairwoman, Congresswoman Green, is in charge of running this committee. Now, in the last
Why? Because Robert Garcia wants to decide who runs the committee, even though he's in the minority. Robert Garcia wants to decide how to run the executive branch, even though he's a lowly backbencher, low IQ congressman. Yeah, Robert Garcia's in charge, America. Clapping seals for Robert.
Hearing. So I thought I'd bring one as well.
All right, thanks, pal. Let me use the Yiddish. You're a schmuck. Yes. Go look it up, Robert Garcia. Or go ask Bernie Sanders what it means. Go ahead. Then we have this Jasmine Crockett, who's turned out to be sort of a younger Maxine Waters. Lunatic. Absolute lunatic. But entertaining nonetheless. Cut 6, go.
Let's talk about defense. That just happens to be the same side of the ledger that Mr. Musk gets the vast majority of his money from. In fact, at the same time that they were unlawfully, and we will stay in court, because on this side, we believe in law and order.
Okay, you're not, these are run-on sentences. You're supposed to finish the thought, and they go on to the next thought, and you're absolutely incoherent. Go ahead.
Number of us are actually lawyers, but nevertheless, we understand.
She's a lawyer. Wow, must be a good lawyer. Go ahead.
And that as well. And so there's things such as, impoundment, right? Because as Mr. Whitson said, he said, we need to return the power of the purse to Congress. It never left. According to the Constitution, that's where it's at. Now, I know that people are confused right now because for whatever reason, we had a guy
Shut up.
that
I'm
went
done with you. When we come back, we'll come back with a real lawyer, a real scholar. There's some really good stuff to say. Randy Barnett, law professor, Georgetown. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Well, it's been a while since we've had my buddy, Professor Randy Barnett, on the program. You're still a law professor at Georgetown, aren't you, Randy?
I sure am, Mark. And it's been a long time since we've talked, but boy, oh boy, times sure have changed, haven't they?
Times have changed. I want to get into that with you. You've written a fantastic book, To a Life for Liberty, The Making of an American Originalist. But before we get into the book, and I definitely want to, what do you make of all these judges and these injunctions? I mean, I'm going over each and every one of them, and in most cases I'm saying, where the hell is this authority coming from?
Well, I think here, as always, I think the left is overplaying its hand. And by coming on so strong across so many jurisdictions and so many judges, there's really not going to be any choice but for the Supreme Court to vacate all of this stuff, maybe in one fell swoop. If they had picked apart a little bit here, a little bit there, then maybe the court could have hung back. But this is kind of judicial disobedience in a way that I think this is going to be wrapped up, sooner than we may think.
Well, some of these judges are actually backing off a little bit. We saw one who said, okay, you can go ahead with the severance. The union doesn't have standing. And Politico, which is subsidized by the federal taxpayers, was very, wait a minute, he didn't rule on the law. They didn't have standing, genius. And then we see in the Treasury case, well, maybe the senior officials can take a peek at the information in order to conduct an audit. But this is basic executive branch stuff. This doesn't in any way interfere with any other branch. They're trying to run their government, right?
Absolutely. I mean, this is not the appropriate role of a judge. But we know when a plaintiff comes in and files a complaint, the judge has to deal with the complaint. If it's a TRO, they have to deal with the TRO. They were picked. These judges were picked. This was venue shopping. We know that happens. Forum shopping. We know that happens all the time. It's just going to have to play itself out, and I think it will play itself out. We know the government lawyers are handling it their side well, and I just don't think it's going to last very long. I think partly because it's so overwhelming in so many different places, even the Supreme Court's going to be roused from its slumber and do something about it.
Yeah, which is not often. And one other thing, let me bring up, Randy. In Boston, the chief judge in the district court there, he said, all right, look, we're going to have to start spreading these cases throughout the Commonwealth because he even said, everybody knows what's going on here. We're being overwhelmed with lawsuits brought here in our jurisdiction. So everybody knows what's going on, don't they?
I think so. It's pretty apparent. And here's where maybe Chief Justice Roberts' judicial restraint, which he used to our disadvantage in the Obamacare case, might actually come out to our advantage, as well as the fact that he tends to be responsive to political opinion and the wave of political opinion. And I think President Trump has the wind at his back politically. Between both of those things, my guess is this is going to end. It may take some weeks to do it, but it's good we're having this fight right up front, right away, so we can get clear of the decks.
A lot of good things happening legally and otherwise, don't you think, with this president and this administration?
I mean, Mark, we're both old enough to remember the Reagan administration, but I'm sure as someone who was in the Reagan administration, you have to say that we've seen nothing like this. If the Reagan Revolution was a revolution, this is a cataclysm for the other side. We've sort of been waiting all our lives for this, haven't we?
Yes. And our friend Glenn Reynolds, a libertarian much like you are, and with his wonderful site, he said, I've never seen a president this libertarian before. Is he right about that?
I know. He said it. Yeah. He said a conservative is a liberal who got mugged, and a libertarian is a conservative who had the federal government take after him and try to put him in jail and ruin him.
Oh, you libertarians. But anyway, go ahead.
That's really what Trump said when he went to the Libertarian Party National Convention. He says, if I wasn't a libertarian before they came after me, I sure am now.
But he's not completely free market economics, is he?
No, obviously not. Not with his view of tariffs. But the point here is that he's fighting for liberty like you do. You and I don't agree about every policy issue ourselves. But we do agree that first comes rights and then comes government. And we finally have somebody who's prepared to take on the federal behemoth with the help of Elon Musk, who gives him the capacity to do something that, no president has had before.
And we're at least in the same ballpark. These other guys are like beyond the bleachers, these leftists, the Democrat Party. Again, in your lifetime, have you ever seen a Democrat Party like this?
No, but I think that's really going to work to our favor. They used to remember the Democratic Party used to have take popular sides of popular issues, and you and I used to be the minority in terms of popularity. Everything that Trump is arguing for is an 80-20 issue. They're all 80-20 issues. He won't argue. He won't do anything that's not an 80-20 issue. And plus, the media has neutered itself, so they are nothing more than podcasters now. They can't stir up the kind of trouble they used to be able to because they've lost all their credibility. So we're really in an amazingly good position right now. Judges to one side.
We're talking to Professor Randy Barnett. I've known a lot of lawyers over the years. I've read a lot of what they've written, listened to a lot. He's one of the greatest. He just is. He is a professor of law at Georgetown University. He's written a fantastic book. It's not just about himself. It's about all these issues and the whole environment of the law, its relationship to liberty and government, all these things that are so crucial to your prosperity and your freedom. It's called A Life for Liberty, The Making of an American Originalist. You can get it on Amazon.com and many other places, but that's where I would go. This book is really worth reading. I'm a lot more careful now about the authors that I bring on this program, and I very much wanted Randy on there. A Life for Liberty, The Making of an American Originalist. We only have a few minutes left in this segment, but we're going to have more time in the next segment, Randy. First of all, let's do it this way. Reintroduce yourself to the American people so they know who you are.
Well, thank you, Mark. I'm the lawyer that brought the medical marijuana case to the Supreme Court in 2004 and argued that case. But then I'm also the lawyer that developed the theory of why the individual insurance mandate is unconstitutional. And that was the Obamacare case that we got 5 votes for our theory, though we lost Justice Roberts. So it was what I learned on the Raich case that allowed me to be the point person for the healthcare challenge. We were all greatly disappointed about that. But the book tells the story of both of those cases. It also tells the story of how I became an originalist myself. And then in so telling that story, I tell the story about the growth of the originalist movement, which when you and I were kids, There was no such movement.
Didn't exist.
And now look what we got. Now look where we are. Exactly. And I was really part of that. And by telling a first-person account of how that movement developed, I think everyone will get a better understanding of just what originalism is and what it isn't.
And after the break, I want you to tell everybody what you think originalism is and what it isn't, because there are disputes within the originalist movement and thinking. But it's like I always say, even though Scalia and Clarence Thomas didn't always agree, they came at the issue the appropriate way. So again, if you're somewhere in the vicinity of originalism, that's good, as opposed to in left field. We're going to get into this a little bit. It's very, very interesting. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin, America's Tyranny Hunter. Call in now, 877-381-3811.
You know, America, there's no escaping the importance of the law and the Constitution in all these cultural, political, and governmental issues. And Randy Barnett's been at the center of it for decades. He's got a beautiful book, Life for Liberty, The Making of an American Originalist. So what is an originalist, Randy Barnett?
I can summarize originalism in one sentence, and that is the meaning of the Constitution should remain the same until it's properly changed by amendment. Mm-hmm. The meaning of the Constitution should remain the same until it's properly changed by amendment. And remember, Mark, you and I first got to know each other in the Article 5 Amendments Convention issues that was around Obamacare at the time of Obamacare. I proposed the repeal amendment. I have a chapter in the book discussing the repeal amendment I proposed, which was introduced into both houses of Congress, and that was an amendment that would have given the states, a majority of the states, the power to repeal any federal law or regulation, restoring a state check on federal power we lost with the 17th Amendment, stopped the legislatures from appointing the senators. Mm-hmm. So that's how you and I got going together. But that's what originalism is. Until you have an amendment, the Constitution has to stay the same. Mm-hmm. And it's not a living, growing thing, although, it needs to be applied to changing circumstances. But its principles are enduring, and we were very fortunate to have it. We probably couldn't get it now if we wanted it. We're not able to do it, but we still have it. It was given to us by our predecessors.
By that, what you're saying is, in today's environment, the Constitution that we have would not have been written, adopted, or ratified, would it?
No, I mean, obviously. This is the reason why America is what it is, because we were lucky enough to, at a singular moment in time, after the Declaration of Independence, where people put together this Constitution, and we're actually starting to move against slavery at the same time. It was a remarkable period. After that, things kind of went downhill for a while until the Civil War pulled us back out of this tailspin that we got into. But at the founding, that was before that happened, we had founders that were completely dedicated to liberty and individual rights.
Well, how would you define the modern Democrat Party? It seems to me it's the party before the country. It's a completely different animal than even 50 years ago, isn't it?
Well, it's always been the statist party. I mean, I shouldn't say always. In our lifetimes, it's been the statist party, the party of the state. It still is the statist party, but it has been, coming out of the woke universities, we've had, sort of leftism has arisen, and liberals who dominated the Democrat Party sort of gotten driven out, or at least they've been superseded by leftists. And one of the same things happened in academia. Academia got dominated by liberals. Liberals believed in free speech. Liberals believed in discourse. You remember that back when. But the liberals couldn't stand up to the left that they brought inside the gates. So it was like no enemies to our left is what their attitude was. But as a result, they've sort of gotten eaten by the left.
Yeah, because I had law professors like, the Alan Dershowitz types and Democrats like that. And you actually had overlaps where you agreed, right? Now it's pretty tough.
Yeah. And Alan Dershowitz was my law professor. As was Larry Tribe. You could disagree with him as well. Back in those days, you could.
He's lost it.
It's true. You could disagree. And look, one of the things libertarians always used to say is, the Republican Party is like half good and half bad. The Democratic Party is half good and half bad. You could kind of make that argument 30, 40 years ago. But you can't make that argument today.
No.
And so things have really fundamentally changed. But by overplaying their hand in a way, particularly in the culture war, not with economic policy, but with social policy, by overplaying their hand, the Democrats have become the party of the minority, and they've given all the 80-20 issues to President Trump.
A Life for Liberty, the making of an American Originalist. You said you became an Originalist. What were you before, and what exactly caused you to become an Originalist?
Well, first of all, when I was in law school, by the time I was done with constitutional law, I tell the story, I was done with the Constitution, because every time we got to one of the good parts of the Constitution in our casebook, I turned the page and I hear the Supreme Court said, that doesn't mean, anything. The Ninth Amendment doesn't mean anything. The Second Amendment doesn't mean anything. The Privileges or Immunities Clause doesn't mean anything. The Commerce Clause is unlimited. I thought, look, this Constitution thing, that didn't work out so well. It hasn't proven to be workable. But then with the founding of the Federalist Society, I was asked to give a speech. When I was became a law professor, I became a contracts professor, because writings still matter when you're in contracts. But the Federalist Society got founded, and 5 years into its existence, it invited me to give a talk or to be on a panel at Stanford. And it's a long story. I tell it in the book that gradually I got drawn into this constitutional law stuff again, and I realized, look, I'm a law professor. I've got tenure. I could talk about the original Constitution now. Nobody can stop me. I can talk about the original Constitution. But look what's happened between then and now. Then it was just me and a handful of other people. And now look, we've got a majority of Supreme Court justices who identify as originalists. And we went through the Tea Party movement. Unfortunately, they got slapped down by the Supreme Court in Obamacare, but they came back again as MAGA. And we're just in a different constitutional moment than we used to be.
Ed Meese had a crucial role in this whole originalist movement, didn't he?
Yeah, Ed is a personal hero of mine. I know you work for him, and he's just an extraordinarily good man. I actually saw him not long ago, he and Ursula, because I have a house out where he has a house at Lake of the Woods, and he's a great man, and he was a great man. That second term of the Reagan administration laid the foundation for what came afterwards. The William French Smith term did not. The Ed Meese term did.
And the impact is so crucial. You were pointing out nobody talked about originalism back then. He took up the cudgel, you did, others did, and pushed it so hard and pushed it hard, challenged the status quo, challenged the Supreme Court, to the point where William Brennan, an associate justice of the Supreme Court, started to respond and fight back, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, here's the role I played, Mark, and it is one that a law professor can play. Ed was out there way before I was. Justice, Antonin Scalia was out there before I was, pushing this on the people, pushing this to the public. But what I was able to do, and I described this in the book, I was able to develop the theory of originalism to respond to all the non-originalist theories that were being articulated by other law professors and judges. And so, you need boots on the ground like Justice Scalia and Ed Meese, but you also need a roadmap. You also need a theoretical defense, because you write books. That's why you write books. And that's what I did. I provided the intellectual case for originalism. I wasn't alone, but there was only a handful of us working on this.
No, but let's be honest. I'm going to say this. You're one of the founding fathers of the movement. You're very crucial. And that's why this book is very crucial. A Life for Liberty, the making of an American Originalist. We can talk about it. I lived through it by being at Ed Meese's side. You were and are one of the great theoreticians behind it. And this is very, very important. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I thank you so much. It means a lot, coming from you, Mark. But that's, somebody is a division of labor. Different people have different jobs to do. And my job was to develop the theory of originalism so it was more or less bulletproof. And it's now become the theory to beat in academia. Everybody who does constitutional theory has to argue against originalism because we're the theory to beat. That's just not, they used to be able to ignore us, but they can't now. And when Robert Bork, was defeated after he said he was an originalist, no Republican nominee for 30 years would call himself an originalist until Neil Gorsuch did that in 2017. And that marked the turning point where originalism really came into its own on the court and amongst all the lower court judges. And some of them that Trump appointed are really, really sharp, I have to tell you. I run a Originalism for Judges seminar every spring, and they come. We have up to 30 or 40 federal judges and about 20 state Supreme Court justices, and these are really, really sharp people, Mark. You would be very, very proud to be around them.
The book is A Life for Liberty, The Making of an American Originalist. I strongly encourage you to get it. It's very readable, from Amazon.com. Is it fair to say, I would say, you may not, but is it fair to say that there really isn't a counter-legitimate interpretation of the Constitution? Because originalists are really trying to figure out what this language means. They look at the intent, some look at other things, the legislative, whatever. The point is, the other way really isn't a legitimate way, is it?
Well, I don't really, it's wrong, I think, but I wouldn't know if it's illegitimate. But it's wrong and it's mistaken. But there's a variety of different non-originalisms. There's not just one. Essentially, the most popular one is called pluralism, which means you take into account all kinds of things, maybe even including the meaning of the text. It's just that all these other things can supersede the text, and that's not right. That's not the reason we have a written constitution. It's the law of the land, and judges should not be able to change the law of the land any more than we can change the laws that the legislature imposes on us.
But it's not just morally wrong. It's not, this is just me. It's not legitimate. Because if you want to be a judge, you've got a job to do, and your job is to try and figure, it's like, let me put it in its simplest terms so the public out there understands. You have a contract. It's not a living and breathing contract. You're looking at the contract. You're trying to figure out, what are my obligations? What aren't my obligations? What are my rights? What are the terms, and so forth and so on. So if somebody comes along, and you're right, there are multiple ways to do it, I suppose, and says, no, I let's massage this. It's okay to a point, but if your goal isn't to really understand what the contract is, which is what originalism is, isn't it, essentially, then it's wrong, but it's illegitimate too.
Well, let me give an argument for why you're right about the legitimacy point, and it's this. No appointee, no nominee these days, not for the last 10 or 20 years, would come before the court, Democrat or Republican, whether the Senate's controlled by the Democrats or Republicans, and say that as a judge, they ought to be able to override the meaning of the Constitution. They won't admit it. They won't admit it out loud. And if they won't admit it out loud, even though we know what they're going to do when they get on the bench, if they won't admit it out loud, in that sense, you're absolutely right. It's not a legitimate position, or they would just freely embrace it. But they don't freely embrace it. They run from it.
Let me say this. I'm going to do something I rarely do because I'm enjoying this a lot, and I think the audience is too. We have a short segment after this break. Professor Barnett, I want to keep you so we can continue with your fantastic book, A Life for Liberty, The Making of an American Originalist. You can go to Amazon.com. I encourage you to do it. Grab it. They discount everything there. You're going to want to read this book. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
So we're back with our friend, Professor Randy Barnett. Get this book. This book is unbelievable. A Life for Liberty, The Making of an American Originalist, Amazon.com. Everything and anything, really, you've ever wanted to know about the Constitution and one of the great founders of the Originalist movement. Randy Barnett, if you had to sum up your book for people who are listening and saying, okay, what's the final word? What's the final word?
Well, this is a great book to give to anybody who wants to know how to live your life.
Are we not on the air?
Can you hear me, Mark? Can you hear me, Mark?
Go right ahead.
Okay. Sorry. Anyway, this is a book I wrote this book for my grandchildren. This is a book to give to a young person who may wish to go on to live their own life for liberty, how you can stand up against the crowd. Mark, when I was 12 years old, in 1964, I got up in front of my entire junior high school and grade school student body and debated on behalf of Barry Goldwater in a heavily Democratic town. And so this is a book about how you can go against the crowd and stick to your principles and eventually overcome your obstacles and be impactful and actually make the world a better place. And I wrote this book to inspire younger people and people who are going to law school and who might feel embattled. That they too can do what I did. I'm not some Superman. I did it because I stuck with my guns and I stuck to my principles. And this is a book that tells you how to do that.
And I read it. It's fantastic. You really don't have to be a lawyer to understand it because it's in plain English and you take the reader through it step by step, correct?
It's a lot of stories, and the book is long, but the chapters are very, very short. And so you can read it just a little piece at a time. And I tell a lot of really interesting stories about legal practice and what it's like to be a kind of an outsider and eventually, doing pretty well for yourself.
And as you point out just now, it can apply to anybody in any walk of life. You're encouraging people, showing people that, stand up for your principles and fight for your principles. And this is one of the ways in which you can do it, correct?
Yeah, you do not have to compromise. You could be smart, you don't want to be a bad guy. You don't want to be annoying, but you don't have to compromise. Mark, you haven't compromised, and look where you are today.
Yeah, but I'm annoying.
Well, that is your trademark, I have to admit.
And by the way, very quickly, over at Georgetown Law, we had a young lady on who goes to your law school. Very, very upset about a speaker that was about to be present there. Somebody was convicted of a terrorism act, I believe. And one of these front organizations pushing her, now they postponed it because of the weather and so forth. But how are things going at Georgetown?
Well, that young lady, by the way, is a student of mine. She just finished taking my constitutional law class.
Great young lady.
And she's a very stand-up person. I spend half my year in Florida, and so I'm sort of happily away from the place at this point. So I can't really tell you what the atmosphere is now.
Me too, by the way. All right, my friend. Get the book, folks. A Life for Liberty. It's a great book by Professor Randy Barnett. You're going to love it. And pass it on to family members and friends as too. Randy, take care of yourself. God bless you, brother.
Thank you so much, Mark.
We salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, emergency personnel, our trucker, the men and women in Ukraine, our brothers and sisters in Israel, and you, red-blooded America. See you tomorrow.